This is the Infinite Moment Podcast, where we discuss topics that focus on stress relief solutions. Welcome to episode 10 of the Infinite Moment Podcast. And today we're talking about using comedy as a tool for stress relief. That's right, comedy is a powerful thing because it's something we've all experienced, yet there's no simple formula to perfectly describe it. It's both an art and a science, but specifically for today, we're going to take a look at how comedy can actually help reduce your stress levels and overall help you live a higher quality life. So, as always, we're going to take a look at a couple different articles and studies. Comedy is widely subjective, so what some people may find funny, others won't. That's not really the purpose of what we're here for today. Of course, we're all going to have different sensibilities and experiences and things that are familiar to us that will ultimately hit a gear that's funny to us. But in general, I would say we all find something funny. There's something in our lives or the lives of others that we have found funny at one point or another. So this should be very relatable for all of us. Be sure to head over to dissolvestress.com, where right now you can use coupon code TAKEOFF30 to receive 30% off. Okay, so we're going to start with this first article titled The Comedy of Humor, or How to Tell a Joke 101. Most of us watch comedy in some mode of entertainment, be it stand-up comedies or reaction videos to sitcoms like Friends or The 70s Show, or YouTube comments and essential memes. Besides being a mode of entertainment, it has a more vital role as a mechanism to counter stress and increase psychological well-being. Humor is a social lubricant. It helps ease social situations through a sense of vulnerability and authenticity. It's the mental faculty of discovering, expressing, or appreciating the ludicrous or absurdly incongruous. Incongruity in humor is something that feels out of place, odd, or is unexpected from a logical, predictable, or familiar point of view. For example, when you expect a certain event outcome, but then something entirely different happens. This next section goes over the different theories of humor. So let's get into that and see the breakdown. Number one is relief theory. As predictable as a Netflix movie, it states that humor acts as a channel of release for nervous energy. It's a way to blow off some steam. Relief theory. That'll be if you have a favorite comedy. One of mine is 40-Year-Old Virgin. I think it's some of the funniest comedy and just feel good type of movie for relaxing and blowing off steam. So I'm sure we all have our own examples of movies, media, TV that help us in that way. Number two, superiority theory. This theory talks about why we laugh at others' misfortunes for the sole purpose of showing superiority, also known as Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude. It's a German word. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. But obviously sometimes we choose to make fun of others' situations, miscomings, unfortunes to help relieve stress in our own life by comparing and contrasting and realizing that, others sometimes have it worse than we do. It is a way of also releasing stress. However, you got to be careful to not cause damage to others when you do things like that. So, all right, rapid anxiety reduction, also known as RAR. RAR states that humor is a feeling of rapid anxiety reduction. It elucidates that humor is experienced as pleasurable and reinforcing because a negative affective state is removed. Okay, so if I understand this correctly, rapid anxiety reduction. It elucidates that humor is experienced as pleasurable and reinforcing because a negative affective state is... Okay, so the theory here is you can't be both basically angry and happy at the same time. So if you can laugh and that replaces maybe a negative emotion or a negative thought, then you're effectively changing your state of mind and experiencing a reduction of stress. So that's interesting. The next one is the general theory of verbal humor. According to the general theory of verbal humor, 6 types of knowledge sources are needed to detect whether a text is humorous or not. These sources are script opposition, the logical mechanism, the situation, the target, the narrative strategies, and the language. Script opposition, opposite ideas in a context, usually depend on one's culture. So there's a lot to go along with that theory right there. I think they're going to break it down a little bit more as we go on. So let's take a look at this last theory of humor. Humor processing comprises of humor comprehension, incongruity and resolution, humor appreciation, which is amusement, and humor expression, which is expressed as laughter. Humor is made up of cognition, affect, which are emotions, and laughter/expression, or a silent LOL. Mental representations or schemas are activated for each element in the context in a situation, meme, joke, or action. We then notice the incongruity. After that, our attention shifts to the schema context, toward the humorous aspect because of ambiguity, gap, or exaggeration, and that leads to amusement. For example, time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. Now let's go over the 4 types of humor, which are affiliative humor, aggressive humor, self-enhancing humor, and self-defeating or disparaging humor. Self-disparaging humor indicates disparaging remarks aimed at oneself to invoke the listener's amusement. For example, he asked me if I knew a good plastic surgeon. If I did, I'm sure I would not look like this. Yeah, self-disparaging or self-deprecating humor is probably one of my personal favorites because you can make other people laugh by basically picking on yourself. So you don't have to feel bad for making fun of others or taking shots at another who, it may not be warranted to do so. Sometimes it may be warranted to do so, but when you're basically self-disparaging, you're just picking on things that you may feel uncomfortable or you notice about yourself or maybe others have noticed, and you're just kind of taking those things that may be of a challenge for you and making kind of light of it and finding humor in that situation. And I think that's not only helpful for yourself, but if you can make others laugh in that process as well, then that almost helps in your own healing and helps to show others how that can be a benefit to their own stress situations. So the next one is aggressive humor. This includes putting down a targeted individual or group and can psychologically harm them and be viewed as threatening. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about before, where self-disparaging, you pick on yourself. Aggressive humor, you're actually picking on others. You just got to be careful when you do this. Obviously, we've all heard of the yo mama jokes and capping and stuff like that. But it's just important that if you're going to participate in this type of humor, you got to know your audience. You got to know what's okay, what's over the line, and you got to be fair. You can't just bully and target and attack people. Next is affiliative humor. This is a humor that everyone enjoys and includes a sense of well-being, comfort, and happiness. Self-enhancing humor, which is the ability to laugh at yourself when something embarrassing or bad happens to you. For example, if you're wrong about a fact and claim it to be true, you probably just sigh and say, well, can't be the smart one all the time. Yeah, so basically in the moment, instead of getting upset and mad that maybe you were found to be incorrect about something, you make a joke off of it. And it takes the sting off of what you're experiencing, and it also lets others know that you're easygoing. It's okay to laugh at the situation. We all make mistakes, right? In a recent study, self-esteem was positively correlated with self-enhancing humor and affiliative humor, but not with self-defeating and aggressive humor. Another study confirmed this insight. Their results indicated that high self-esteem is associated with higher use of affiliative, aggressive, and self-enhancing humor styles, but lower self-defeating humor. A study by Steiger, Foreman, and Berger shows that self-defeating humor positively correlates with loneliness, shyness, depression, but negatively with self-assessed self-esteem. Their research also suggests that people with damaged self-esteem are similar to those who use self-defeating humor. Damaged self-esteem means there is a vast difference between how you feel about yourself and how you present yourself to the world. Feeling very confident but showing low confidence behavior is a sign of damaged self-esteem. That's very interesting right there. That self-esteem and self-deprecating humor have an inverse relation. Alright, this next section is about humor and attraction. It says many desire a partner who can make them laugh. Humor is a sign of attraction and a desirable trait during mate selection. There's evidence that people consider affiliative humor attractive in long-term relationships and aggressive humor in short-term relationships. So yeah, as you know someone longer, then affiliative humor is going to be more effective because you've shared more experiences, there's more familiarity there that will lend itself to affiliative humor, whereas in a short-term relationship, things are more aggressive, straight to the point, exciting. So aggressive humor kind of correlates with that. Laughter may just be the best medicine. The results of the study promoting emotional well-being through the use of humor revealed that humor led to a significant increase in several markers of emotional well-being, including self-efficacy, positive affect, optimism, and perceptions of control. Clinical psychologists are using humor as a treatment to improve subjective well-being. In fact, humor is a way to stop negative thoughts. A recent study concluded that the benefits of humor are recognized by adult cancer patients and nurses. Humor has a therapeutic effect in clinical practice. Research reaffirms the common belief that humor is an important coping mechanism and a tool of adjustment. A study also highlighted the potential advantages of humor in high-stress service situations, with an ethical imperative of doing no harm. Joking about taboo subjects or sensitive, macabre, painful events is called dark or gallows humor, and it may have therapeutic value, especially for victims of trauma. Self-deprecating humor is quite common between potential mates, amongst friends and family members, and between established mates after tension and arguments, especially during the peacemaking process. Self-disparaging humor can be a mark of authority and good leadership qualities by effectively relieving tension and encouraging member participation. However, if the speaker's jokes target others, it could create a negative impression in terms of helpfulness, communication, and social attractiveness. According to a study published in the Journal of Cognitive Processing, understanding and appreciating dark humor may indicate a higher level of intelligence. In their study, those who preferred dark humor had the highest verbal and nonverbal intelligence and high emotional stability. The high form of intelligence, sarcasm, as Wong and his colleagues said, increases creativity without creating conflict between the expressor and the receiver, but only when trust exists between them. Yeah, you really gotta know your audience when it comes to dark humor. Some people may find things funny that others will not. Alright, so in that article we went over some of the different types of humor, how it can be used in the healthcare system and for different aspects of relieving stress and anxiety in our lives. But we are going to take a look at a couple more articles that go a little bit deeper. Comedy is just so subjective that no justice can really be done to fully describe what comedy is. So that's not the intent here. My intent is to find how humor in general whether it's dark humor, whether it's affiliative humor, or playful humor, or a dad joke, whatever type of humor it is, whatever type of humor, whatever type of joke it is that, is funny for you. I want to see how you can use that humor to basically help reduce the levels of stress in your life. Whether that's just a thought of something that, is an inside joke between you and someone else, or even just between yourself, or whether that's attending a comedy show. It's a whole spectrum of comedy, but the focus is to see how that humor, how that laugh, how that joy, that happiness can be used to help redefine your mindset, help to move away from the heavier, more stressful thoughts, emotions. There's different types of people. For some people, humor may have much more benefit when it comes to stress reduction than it does for others. Some people just find joy and laughter in things more than others. But with that being said, let's get into the next article that goes a little bit deeper into the science and art of comedy. Alright, this next article is titled Humor as a Coping Mechanism. A good laugh or a funny perspective is sure to lighten your mood, but not all humor has the same effect. Being humorous can have many positive effects on overall health. It's viewed as one type of coping mechanism that helps to relieve the burden of stressful emotions. Humor may not always seem appropriate, but if it's used in the right way, it can help to positively change your perspective of troubling circumstances. There are different styles of humor and differences between cultures. Knowing the differences can help determine how to best use humor or not in a way that's pleasant and agreeable to everyone. Yeah, that's important right there. Knowing the differences can help determine how to best use humor or not in a way that's pleasant and agreeable to everyone. Yeah, sometimes you're not trying to please or make your audience agree. You might be trying to shake things up and make them not as comfortable or pleasant. So understanding how humor can be used to ultimately get the result you want, whether that's your own personal stress relief or making someone realize a certain point you're trying to make. So what is a coping mechanism? The various behaviors we carry out in response to stress are referred to as our coping mechanisms. These behaviors can be different for everyone and are attempts to manage and reduce the stress we feel. If you ever found yourself having trouble coping with a stressful situation, such as public speaking or starting a new job, then you've probably already developed your own coping mechanisms. So coping mechanisms can be of the following types. Problem focused. These are behaviors that seek to address the problem causing the stress. Meaning focused attempts to understanding the meaning of the stressful situation. Support seeking, which is calling upon family, friends, or medical professionals to help manage the stressful situation. And emotion focused, behaviors that aim to manage or reduce stressful emotions. In each category, individual coping behaviors can be considered healthy or unhealthy, depending on how the behavior affects your mental and physical health. For example, excessively drinking alcohol to relieve stress will be considered an unhealthy coping behavior. Why do we use humor as a coping mechanism? When a situation feels stressful enough to trigger coping behaviors, humor is used by some to dampen the negative effects of the stress. Stressful feelings can often translate to fear or anxiety. A 2020 review, which referenced psychologist Sigmund Freud's perspectives on humor, suggests that humor can be a way of warding off these feelings. Humor falls into the emotion-focused coping category, as it helps to relieve the burden of stressful emotions. Laughing feels good and can also help improve your health and well-being in different ways. You may at first think that being humorous is always a healthy behavior because it makes you feel good, but humor can be harmful to yourself or others in some cases. It depends on the style of humor being used, according to a 2021 study. So a little bit like we saw in the last article, we're going to take a look at a couple different styles of humor. Under positive humor, there are three types, including affiliative. You can think of this style as a good-natured, light-hearted, jolly humor. It includes things such as funny stories and clever or witty jokes that most people would find funny and take no offense to. Positive reappraisal. If you try to identify humorous aspects of a stressful situation, this is called positive reappraisal or reframing. It helps to shift your perspective of the situation from a threat to a positive challenge. And lastly, self-enhancing. Similar to positive reappraisal, it generally refers to maintaining a funny outlook on life, laughing at yourself for small failures, or privately finding humor in the oddities of daily life. There are two types of negative humor. Self-defeating. This occurs when you make jokes about yourself to try and connect with others. Aggressive. Humor is considered aggressive when it comes at the expense of others. Examples of this include actions such as excessively teasing others or making them feel bad to try to make yourself feel better. Why do we use humor to deflect trauma? Traumatic events can affect your overall mental and emotional well-being. Trauma can sometimes feel unavoidably serious or can never be humorous, but humor can be used to improve trauma in some cases. A 2015 study examined the relationship between humor and psychological trauma in over 200 victims of terror attacks. Researchers found that the healthy humor styles used in this instance were associated with less trauma symptoms. Humor can be used to change your perspective of the trauma from serious to lighthearted, which may help to regulate stressful emotions. In short, laughing and making light of matters that feel serious or heavy may help relieve the emotional effects of the trauma. A 2017 review looked at the relationship between humor and various aspects of well-being between nurses and their patients. Researchers found many benefits of humor in this setting, including improving communication, reducing stress and anxiety, relieving tension, and improving recovery. There's always a chance that trying to be funny can backfire and create discomfort in another person. Humor that's inappropriate can damage relationships in the workplace, according to research from 2019. The highest chance for inappropriate humor is with the negative styles of humor. Aggressive humor in particular is more socially harmful, meaning that it's less likely to be received in social settings. Similarly, when using the self-defeating style, others may lose respect for you or have difficulty taking you seriously. Whether or not humor is effective can also depend on cultural factors. A 2019 review found significant differences in how humor is viewed and used across cultures. In Chinese culture, there are mixed opinions about whether or not humor is appropriate and socially acceptable. Chinese citizens who follow Confucian philosophy tend to devalue humor and generally don't view it as an acceptable behavior. On the other hand, Chinese citizens who embrace Taoism tend to view humor as a way of increasing peace and harmony with nature. This is similar to Canadian culture, which sees humor as socially acceptable, desirable, and beneficial. To recap, humor can be one way of coping with stressful situations that you encounter in your daily affairs. It's primarily a way of managing emotional stress, but also has many other benefits. Not all humor is beneficial, and humor can sometimes be inappropriate. Sticking to positive humor ensures that your jokes and perspectives will be well received, but there are also cultural considerations. So go ahead and have a laugh today if you feel like it. It may make you feel better and help you look on the bright side of things. So what I liked about that article is that it highlighted the importance of being intelligent or mindful when you use humor. Understand the purpose of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make yourself laugh, if you're trying to make others laugh, and at whose expense is that laugh coming at? Obviously, if it's an aggressive style of humor and you're taking shots at others, well, you're probably going to find yourself coming against more resistance unless you understand how that humor will ultimately come around and make everyone laugh, or if for that particular audience, whether that's just yourself or others, is going to find that kind of humor to be relaxing or to be funny or whatever. That laughter can also help resolve or release that level of stress in a way that's not so challenging. It almost allows the energy to move through you by actually experiencing that challenge through laughter, through joy. You can work through the emotion without it bringing you to a lower energy level. And the same goes for others. If you're trying to cheer someone up, say a friend, you may know some of their sensibilities. You may choose to use self deprecating humor in a way in which you apply that situation to yourself, and it kind of relieves the tension or the strength of the energy that the other person is feeling in that moment. So, yeah, being mindful when it comes to humor is very important. Your intention is going to come through your joke, and if it doesn't come through the way you want, you have to think about what you're saying. Dark humor. I particularly find dark humor to be refreshing and funny. Um, there's not much of a line I have when it comes to humor. I think most things are pretty funny, no matter how far you take them. It has to be extreme, like really extreme, for me to feel super uncomfortable when it comes to comedy. So my sensibilities, though, may be a little bit further out than others. And I would have to realize that when it comes to a particular audience or people that I'm telling a joke to. Also, context and experiences. If I'm referencing things that my audience doesn't even understand, then it's not going to land. It's not going to create the effect that I want, which is to create joy, to create relief through laughter. So let's get into our next article. The last article we're going to take a look at here is from the AMA Journal of Ethics. It's titled The Science of Comedy. It's by Anne Libera. For purposes of this article, think of laughter as sounds humans make when amused. People also laugh for many other reasons. We laugh because others laugh. We laugh to demonstrate agreement, or we laugh when we are embarrassed or uncomfortable. Humor is a state of being amused, although it might not be accompanied by laughter. Recently, scientific research on the neuroscience of laughter has showcased the potential intellectual benefits of a brain wired to find humor and the connections between humor responses and the common biases and heuristics. Early philosophers focused on the negative elements of humor and laughter. The superiority theory of humor, attributed to Plato and later promoted by Thomas Hobbes among others, holds that the primary motivator for humor is triumph or pleasure at the pain, flaws, or indignities of others. The superiority theory also implies that laughter and humor are inherently negative and that humor requires ridicule or disparaging others. We are thought to laugh at something or someone because we see that person as genuinely lesser than ourselves. Certainly, laughter born of derision, insult, and ridicule are still common today, from playgrounds to televised roasts and social media sites. A second major theory of humor is tension and release. Based on Sigmund Freud's theory of the unconscious, it suggests that repression of sexual or aggressive thoughts and urges creates a buildup of energy released in the form of laughter. Freud saw laughter and humor as providing a kind of release valve, and thus the types of material that generate laughter are necessarily base and appealing to the id, the childlike portion of the human psyche. The third and currently most broadly popular of the major philosophical theories of humor is the incongruity theory developed by Immanuel Kant. This theory holds that humor results when our brains perceive two things as coexisting in a manner that does not at first appear to make logical sense, and that laughter or humor occurs when the discomfort caused by this incongruity is resolved in some way. A simple example of this is a pun. Humor results when we discover that a word that initially appears incongruent in the context in which we first encounter it has another meaning that makes logical sense when a different context is revealed. And the joke, light travels faster than sound. That's why some people seem bright until they speak. An initial mental image of a person glowing brightly makes more sense when we understand it as referring to intelligence. Incongruity theory has been bolstered by the study of heuristics and biases and by neuroscience. To use the terminology of Daniel Kahneman, The brain has two separate systems. System 1, the fast brain, is primarily automatic and intuitive, and System 2, the slow brain, proceeds deliberately and logically. Neuroscientists have suggested a possible genetic advantage to laughter and humor, theorizing that pleasurable experiences of discovering and resolving incongruity rewards the brain with dopamine and trains us to use System 2 to test potentially incorrect conclusions to which our faster but less diligent System 1 jumps. Yeah, that's important. It's interesting how you do have like the autonomic mind, and then we have our deeper thinking mind. So our autonomic mind is running consistently really fast, and it's kind of making theories as it goes without doing much critical thinking. But when the deeper, the slower mind kicks in and reframes or kind of makes sense of context within a situation, then it causes us a resolution to almost an uncomfortability. Let's continue. I propose that in generating and refining their work, comedians use three elements. The first element is recognition. It could be argued that recognition is implicit in most traditional theories of humor, but for the work of comedy, it is primary. One of the easiest ways for a comedian to get an audience to laugh is to describe something familiar. It can be a local landmark, an impression of a public figure, or a reference to that television show that everyone is currently watching. Even more likely to incite laughter are references specific to or particularly salient for a given audience. Social science research suggests that the strongest laughter is generated when a comedian shares an observation that supports or reflects audience members' experiences of the world. Genuinely shared laughter creates bonds through mutual understanding. I label the second element needed for comedy pain. The tension and release, incongruity, and superiority theory involve this element either directly or indirectly in the form of tension, cognitive dissonance, and embarrassment or shame, respectively. A technique frequently used in generating comedy is to begin by listing recognizable elements, events, people, occupations, and then applying some element of pain. The third element is a context that allows us to reflect on these experiences with some degree of objectivity, equanimity, or sense of safety, perhaps making them benign. I prefer to describe this element as distance. Distance can be temporal, as in the phrase tragedy plus time equals comedy, attributed to Steve Allen and others. Or it can be spatial and psychological, as evident in Mel Brooks saying that tragedy is if I'll cut a finger, if I go to Mount Sinai, get an x-ray, have to change bandages. Comedy is if you walk into an open sewer and die. You can share humor just by releasing tension and by recognizing awkwardness or discomfort without making any kind of formal joke. Laughter is inherently social, and shared laughter creates more points of connection. Alright, so that article was important for helping us to understand how to use uncomfortability to reach comfortability in essence. Much of comedy is basically presenting an uncomfortable situation and then causing some resolution that ultimately we find humor in. Right? So one of the examples from that article was it would be a tragedy to basically, get an injury, have to go to the hospital, have to get some sort of therapy, and that's a tragedy. But to walk into a sewer and die, now that's funny because of the juxtaposition of someone literally walking into a sewer and then dying. And here I am trying to explain a joke. The moment you start trying to explain a joke is the moment it loses any humor it has, really. Unless that's part of the joke, which is on some Inception shit, but I'm not going to go there today. That's a whole nother podcast. A lot of stress comes from the fear of the unknown or fear of the uncomfortable. And if we can find laughter in those moments, if we can take those moments of uncomfortability, of unfamiliarity, of stress, and basically pull the humor out of it through finding some common juxtaposition, some resolution when it comes to the uncomfortableness of a situation, then that ultimately helps us connect with others, helps us to then release dopamine, to help relieve the stress we feel, bring us into that present moment, find levity in a tough situation. There's moments in our lives where we just can't get away from the stress. So, laughter can therefore be used as a coping mechanism. If this is a stress that you're unable to eliminate, if it's something that you must go through, it doesn't have to be unbearable. You may have to find the laughter in some of these situations. So I'll give you an example. For me personally, as an AC refrigeration technician, I often have to go on call. And it's a stressful situation that lasts for a week. And for that entire week, you can be called to have to run different jobs. Now, if you hyper focus on that and be extremely stressed that at any moment you can be called to have to go to work, then it can cause um, just a lot of a negative mindset from what I've seen. But if you can ultimately, find humor in the moments or times where you notice that stress is starting to come up. So, for example, if I get the call and they say, "Hey, we got two calls for you that you need to go run," instead of me getting upset and down on myself, I might make a joke like, "Yeah, you goddamn right, I got some calls to go fucking run. Yeah, yeah, you need big legs out there to go run some calls, don't you?" Something like that where it's self-deprecating, it's making fun of myself, but it's funny to me because I'm almost flipping a situation from a negative to a positive just by taking the control back through humor. Um, and obviously, humor is not always an appropriate response to a stressful situation. It all depends on the context and the nuance of a situation. That's just all part of the journey of figuring out that which is important and funny and brings joy to your life. But I would employ that anyone who finds high stress in the life, just try and find more humor. Try and be around people who are funny or who enjoy laughing, who you enjoy making laugh. Go to comedy shows, watch comedy specials on whatever platform you choose. But I do think it's an effective tool when it comes to just reducing the levels of stress and heavy energy that we sometimes feel in our lives. So, with that being said, that wraps up this episode of the Infinite Moment Podcast. I'll catch you guys next time. Take it easy.